to the session 3 of today's talk. The first talk is Prof. Bassel Elzorkany. He's the professor of medicine and rheumatology at Ain Shams University. He's well known in the Middle East and Cairo University, and he is a full SAS member and General Secretary of the Egyptian Society of Rheumatic Disease. And he is going to talk about the SAS Health Index as a novel tool. So I'll ask Dr. Bassel to start the talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Today I'm honored to be invited again to the 6th SSR. I have been here in the 5th as well. I'm going to talk on the SAS Health Index. What's this? It's a novel tool. What I'm going to cover very briefly, I don't think I'm going to take my 20 minutes, all of them, is why we need that, what is the objective, how it was developed. And then when you develop a tool and you need to apply it to your, for example, Arabic patient or Hindi patient or Chinese patients, you need to translate it, to test it that it is valid, and then you do what we call cross-cultural adaptation, and that's very important because sometimes I see many studies are conducted. For example, you are trying to address depression. You bring a depression scale and then you translate it by yourself and apply it to your patients and you publish the results. This may not be very accurate because sometimes some questions may not be fitting what you are doing. And after we did the translation and cross-cultural adaptation, we had to validate what we did. So we tried to validate its construction, its reliability, its discrimination and sensitivity to change. You will understand this in a minute. I'm going to brief you how to reach the Arabic version from the SS website before I conclude. So about the rationale and objective, yesterday I showed you this slide, which is that we need to care about everything. And we have assessment tools for everything. You can have the SDAS, which includes CRP, BASDI without CRP for the disease activity. The BASFI is the functional index for the function. The BASMI is metrology index for the mobility of the axial joints. The MSAS is for radiographic progression. The Leeds enthesitis index is again for enthesitis, and the Maastricht as well. Swollen joint count can help you in peripheral joints. So we have plenty of things. And I believe you all agree that ankylosing spondylitis has major burden on patients' lives in general. Despite all the advances we have, it has costs to the patient, society, and healthcare systems. And definitely it results in a reduced quality of life. So how can you grasp everything in one assessment tool? Because so far we do not have an agreement, at least between the SS members, on how to assess the burden on health in general. So our objective in developing this one was simple. We understand that we have a burden and it can be considerable. We understand also that there is no agreement has been reached among experts in the SS about how to define the severity. And we have something called International Classification of Functioning Disability and Health, what is known as ICF. From that, we had a core set of items for ankylosing spondylitis to select to represent the entire spectrum of possible problems of functioning. And based on that, our objective was to develop a tool to quantify health in ankylosing spondylitis, and that's what we know as the SAS Health Index. So, how did we develop the original version? Very briefly, we had worked through 5 stages, through meetings and questionnaires, etc., to identify, at the end of the day, from like 260 items, 17 items in these categories: the pain, the maintaining a body position, moving around, toileting, energy and drive, motivation, sexual functions, etc., to the end of the items. And so the final items based on the International Classification of Functioning were those 17 items. I don't want to go to read them all, but you will find them in the later on in details. So you can ask the patient these 17 items and you will get just a dichotomous answer. I agree, I do not agree. Okay? And each one of these items is present in the International Classification of Functioning somewhere. At the same time, we understand that the health, the function, is not a matter of the patient and the disease itself, but the environmental factor plays a role. So we had to work also on the environmental factors, and let me define you. I'm sorry you can't see this, but anyway. Environmental factors are defined as elements external to an individual that can influence functioning and can be facilitators or barriers. So for example, if I'm crossing the street, you bring someone to hold my hand and cross me the street, he is a facilitator, okay? If you have, for example, someone is just scrambling you, he is a barrier. That's in a simplest term, okay? So here we aim to select a core set of environmental factors which influence importantly self-reported functioning in patients with AS. That's not working properly anyway. I will have to skip this part. We had like 53 items, and out of them we went to 37 items, and at the end there were 9 items, as you can see here, okay, in the line above the end one. And of these, 3 items serve as facilitator and 6 items serve as barriers. I was just marking them, but it's not working, sorry. Those are the final environmental item set. Again, I will come to them even in the Arabic version at the end. So now after we did that, how can we apply it to our Egyptian patients, for example, or your Saudi patients, or your Hindi patients, etc.? So we need to do this step. In this step, we worked to measure the health index and environmental factors, and we included 15 languages, including an Arabic version. So we assessed the function and health. The objective was to translate and adapt the original English version of the SS Health Index and the environmental items, and the important thing is cross-culturally into 15 languages. Let me ask you a question. If you ask a Western patient, can you use the toilet? His understanding of the word toilet can come to the toilet that we all know nowadays, the one that is present in your rooms here, okay? But if you ask a patient from a rural area, undeveloped area, somewhere in the southern part of Egypt or in Bangladesh or somewhere, his understanding would be that we make a hole in the ground, for example, it's just like that, and that's the word toileting, what I mean. So a patient who can sit, for example, it's very easy to use the toilet. The one who cannot go to the ground would be very difficult. But now the term toileting means different things, and that's what we mean by cross-cultural. If I ask a lady or a man in the Western country, have you lost interest in sex? He finds this is a usual question. If I ask a lady here with spondyloarthritis about the same question, she may not answer. She would tell me that I prefer not to answer this question, okay? That's why we need to make what we call cross-cultural. And we work through these guidelines, and I refer you to that, because if you would like to translate and work on something like that, we have guidelines for the process of cross-cultural adaptation. And we work through these 5 steps: the translation, forward and backward, the synthesis of the wording, the back translation till we prove that it's the same, the expert committee review, and the field test. After you did that, you had to take 10 patients in each country with the translation, and you test in them to provide them homogeneous, comparable. So in the results, I'm afraid this may not show again. Okay, we worked through the Arabic. As usual, we had a mean age in the less than 45 years. Majority were males, not like 2/3 of them were male. But, some difficulties were experienced with translation of the contextual factors, indicating that these concepts may be more culturally dependent. And as a result of that, as a result of cognitive debriefing is al-istikhlas al-ma'rifi. I'm asking you a question to get something informative, okay? A new response option not applicable was added to 2 items of the SS Health Index to improve the appropriateness, okay? So in the English one did not have, it has only agree or disagree, but here we have additional thing which is not applicable. I don't want to answer this. So functioning and health in patients with axial SpA now can be assessed in clinical trials and in daily practice by using one of the SS Health Index versions, the English one, the Arabic one, whatever, covering most of the languages worldwide. So now we did the translation. Now, how can we be sure that this SS Health Index is valid? Its construction is valid. It's reliable. It can discriminate patients with active or inactive disease in poor health and good health. And it is sensitive to change. Let me tell you very briefly now what we did, and then I'm going to come to the details. Is it valid? So I test the SS Health Index against all we know in that context. So I compare the SS Health Index with BASDI, with ASDAS, with BASFI, with short form 36, with physical and mental component, with plenty of measures. You're going to see them in a minute. And if it correlates with them, then that's good in its construction. And I bring a patient and test him. And then in, for example, 4 days again, I retest him. If he answers the same answers, then this test is reliable. It really expresses what the patient feels. But if he gives totally different answers, a different score, then this test is not reliable, particularly when the patient is in a stable disease. Now, if the patient is very active, for example, and I test him, and then I added to him a TNF inhibitor, and then I retest him again in 12 weeks' time, and I find that his responses have improved, then this test is sensitive to change. I can understand now, I use it, and it will express or show what is the status of the patient. So we published this last year in the Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases, and our objective was to evaluate the construct validity, interpretability, reliability, and responsive, as well as determination of cut-off points for good and poor health through the translations what we did in 23 countries. So we took a sample. The construct validity was tested. Skip the complicated statistics at the moment. With several standard health outcomes of axial SpA, test-retest reliability was assessed by interclass difference in patients with stable disease. So if you have a stable disease, we'll test the reliability. In those who required an escalation of therapy, it's not clear anyway. Because of a high disease activity, responsiveness was tested after 2 to 24 weeks. It depends. Are you going to add a full dose non-steroidal? I can test him after 2 weeks. A biologic, I will test him in 12 to 24 weeks. Sorry? So we plan to include, look at the last line, 1,700 patients. In June 2014, in our second meeting, we met 1 year earlier. We planned on the sample size. For example, in Egypt, because it's a large country, I included 100 patients. In fact, I included 123 patients in this study, but 5 patients were having missing data, lost to follow-up, so at the end of the day, they were 118. Some small countries that, for example, does not have heavy population will include only 15 patients. And we work through a baseline stage, testing everything, and then a stable patient will go through reliability, while patients who need intensification of their treatment will go through the sensitivity to change part. So now, very briefly, the results are as follows. We were able at the end of the day to include 1,548 patients. As usual, majority were males. Okay. Construct validity ranged from low to high, and that's very good. It does not change with age, but it changes with, for example, BASFI. Internal consistency was high. Because reliability was good as well. Responsiveness among 246 patients were moderate large for non-steroidal and conventional synthetic DMARDs, and very high for tumor necrosis factor inhibitor. And we can say that, so skip this part, sorry. If you have a score below 5, then you mean that you have good health. And if you have a score above 12, then this is a poor health, after a lot of statistics in that. Those are the things that we collected, including several tests. You can read them from the Assess Health Index and SDS, BASDI, BASFI, Pain, Physician Global, Well-being last week. A lot of tests you can find, including the absenteeism, the work status, etc. And we have a moderate to high correlation between health index on one side and all the patient-reported outcomes on the opposite side. And it can discriminate. If the patient are having inactive disease, they are having also a low health index, a low SDS, a low BASDI. If they are having a good function, again, they have a low health index and a low BASFI, etc. So it correlated well and discriminated between patients with different disease activity. And let me brief you with our user manual. So you can apply it now, because in this work we worked on radiographic, non-radiographic, and peripheral spondyloarthritis patients. We studied items related to pain, emotional functions, sleep, sexual function, mobility, self-care, and community life. And the environmental factors address support relationships, attitudes, and health services. So it's a dichotomous response. If the patient, 1 means I agree, 0 means I do not agree, okay? The total sum should be, I'm sorry for that, the total sum should be between 0 to 17. And the lower the score, indicating the better health status. Item 7 and 8 may not be applicable to all patients, and then you may count between to 16 items or 15 items, not necessarily the full 17. Anyway, so I will just show you how's that. If you have missing items, you use this formula where the X means the item, summation score, and the M is the number of missing items. And you cannot have more than 3 missing items. If you have more than 3 responses missing, you cannot use the health index. So what about the Arabic version now? Can you get it? Please log in to the ASAS website, and in that you will find here clinical instruments. You can see it now. If you click on clinical instruments, it's going to open several things, the ASDAS calculator, etc. One of them is the ASAS Health Index. If you click on that, you will have a long list with the available languages, including Arabic as the first one. It's on the website. And if you click on that, you can download the PDF of that, where you have the 17 items, and you can give it to the patient. The patient would answer. Look at answer 7 and 8. لقد فقدت الاهتمام بالجنس. Well, I would like not to answer this. لا أريد الإجابة. And أجد صعوبة في تشغيل الدواسات في سيارتي. In some areas of the world we don't have a car, we don't have the pedals to use, so I prefer not to answer this. لا ينطبق على حالتي، لا أستطيع أو لا أقود سيارة. In that case, you will calculate for 15 items. And those are the 9 environmental items. They are present again in the website. So, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I believe now it's time to conclude this, and I like to read the conclusion of this manuscript, which is: the SS Health Index proved to be valid, reliable, and responsive. It can be used to evaluate the impact of spondyloarthritis and its treatment on functioning and health, and it can compare disease impact between different populations, and that's possible. Thank you very much for your...
Thank you, Prof. Bassel. So, do we have room for one question? Okay, so any questions for Prof. Bassel?
Any questions for me?
Great, thank you.
Everything is very clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Please all use health index. You can try it in different stages. You can use it to conduct studies, not only on a spondyloarthritis patient, I mean axial or so. You can try it on peripheral things, in psoriatic arthritis as it fits, and then test it against other measures for psoriatic arthritis and to see how correlated it can be.
Prof, I have a question.
Yes, please do.
The questionnaires you put on, maybe I'm not sure.
Can we get back to the slides, please? Can we get back to the slides?
It was maybe lots of things are translated into our cultures, but there are so many things maybe the patients, they will not be able to really tell you that, because one of the last questions you said, هل أصدقائي يفهمونني أو يفهمون whatever. Usually in our culture, people, they don't like to disclose their diseases to even to their close friends. So I'm not sure how credible is the questionnaires was studied in our cultures. Maybe, but it's applicable maybe in the West. It's not applicable in our culture.
Very good question. Now, to prove that it is applicable in our country, is that the simplest thing is to conduct the same study in your patients, and you compare your results with the results from Venezuela, Argentina, Brazil, UK, etc., and the rest of the world. And if they are comparable and there is no lack of homogeneity, which is لا يوجد عدم توافق في الستاتستيك methods, في الإجابات, في responses, then you are credible. At the same time, we test the health index, we get the score of it, but the environmental factor is not tested. I mean, you don't get a score for environmental factor, but that's for you to know if the patient is having surrounding environment that can be facilitator or barrier. So I do not count it and build on the environmental factor the stage of health. The health is built from the health index scoring.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.